Hello, everyone. My name is Joe Olasino of CCSI, and I'm an account executive on the commercial sales team. And I'd like to thank everyone for attending the first in a three-part series on CCSI's Cloud Offerings Education. So today, Joe Goldberg, who's our Cloud Practice Manager, he'll be discussing DRaaS, Disaster Recovery as a Service. So if you have any questions, you can submit them via our chat on the WebEx. And for those of you not familiar with CCSI, we've been in business since 1974, and we have several silos that we have expertise in. One is infrastructure, so infrastructure solutions around networking, wireless, IP telephony. Also, third-party maintenance. We have a service called CCSINet, and that's around hardware break-fix solutions. And then cloud and data center, which is going to be our discussion today. And also cybersecurity and physical security. When I talk about cybersecurity, I'm referring to risk assessments, vulnerability assessments, pen tests, endpoint protection, also managed DDoS attacks, secure mail management, compliance assessments, real-time breach detection, also cloud security, which will be part of our conversation, security awareness training, patch management, application reviews, and then on the physical security side, access control, and video surveillance. On our NOC and SOC, we are an MSP and MSSP provider. So we have solutions 24/7 by 365 for performance monitoring, management, and also remediation. And I just wanted to let you know that CCSI has been recognized by many industries, such as CIO and also industry era education. And here's our client list and associated vertical industries. And now I'd like to introduce Joe Goldberg.
How are you? Today we're going to do the first of 3 webinars on cloud services. Today we're going to focus on disaster recovery as a service. So just to start out, the RightScale, an organization that does surveys of cloud users, released a late 2017 study of people that were using the cloud or people that were not using the cloud as well. 95% of respondents said they were cloud users. Of those, the majority were hybrid cloud users. I think that going forward, you're going to see that hybrid cloud number continue to rise as people decide some services need to stay on-premise, some services they can move off-premise. But today we're going to focus on business continuity and disaster recovery. The cloud really offers you the opportunity as a smaller organization to have the same disaster recovery services available to you as the Fortune 500 organizations. You can have a virtual redundant data center anywhere in the world that you want for minimal cost. Just a couple little fun facts about downtime. The cost of an hour of downtime for a small company is about $8,000. For a mid-sized company, it's about $74,000. It can also really affect your reputation, especially if you're a web-focused company where you do a lot of sales via the web. For example, WhatsApp experienced 3 hours of downtime and they lost 4 million customers. So that's a little bit painful. And the average recovery time for people that don't have a disaster recovery plan is 18 and a half hours. So if you have a server and it completely blows up, the average amount of time it would take you to recover from that failure is 18 and a half hours. So if you kind of extrapolate out how much that would cost your organization to be down for that long, you can see how this can quickly pay for itself. And that downtime could also be from newer threats such as ransomware. Disaster recovery as a service is really the final solution against ransomware. If it makes it through all of your lines of defense and actually gets to one of your servers, you can always fail back to a previous snapshot through disaster recovery to get your data back without having to pay the ransomware folks. As you can see, the cost of a minute of downtime has gone up significantly from year to year. This is just a comparison from 2010 to 2016. And there's a lot of different ways you can lose your data. For example, some poor Bitcoin user lost his wallet, and the backups for his wallet were in the same facility. And when the facility burned, he lost both. And at the time, the wallet was worth $50,000. Today, it's probably would have been worth close to $1 million. But because he didn't have any offsite backups, he lost it all. I'm not sure if anybody remembers, but earlier last year, GitLab suffered a major disaster. One of their admins accidentally deleted one of their core databases, and it was at that point that they realized that their backups were not functioning the way they thought, and they lost a considerable amount of customer data and a considerable amount of reputation at the same time. And a little closer to home, the NYPD is not sure whether they're actually doing backups. The deputy commissioner says they are, but his IT staff will not sign an affidavit that says they will. So it kind of makes you wonder. But cloud-based disaster recovery really offers you more agility. You have the ability to do disaster recovery to any site that the cloud provider has a presence in. You can choose how many snapshots you're going to keep, how often you do testing, all of these things that you really can't control as much in an on-premise type disaster recovery solution. It's a much faster implementation. You don't have to buy the hardware, you don't have to set up the hypervisors, you don't have to set up the operating systems. It's all there for you. It's on somebody else's computer. There's no need for the in-house DR infrastructure. You don't need to spend the money to buy duplicates of everything. And there's a reduction in internal resources. You no longer need all those people to support that redundant infrastructure that you now have in a second city. So there's no need for secondary sites, secondary storage, secondary servers, and you can start to limit your reliance on offsite tape backups for disaster recovery. So you don't have to ship the tapes and then pray that you can actually do the restore. This is basically, on a very high level, how disaster recovery as a service works. You basically take your virtual machines, you replicate them over to inexpensive object storage in the cloud. In the event of a disaster, that object storage is activated and spun up, and the images are converted into block storage, servers are spun up, and you now have an environment that's running in the cloud. In the event of when your site comes back online, whether you've got new servers or your power restored, then you can replicate the data back, or just the change data if your server is back online, back to your site, and then you can do a planned failback in the middle of the night, off hours, whenever, and you're back up and running in your production site. You then destroy all the VMs in the cloud, and you're no longer paying for them. You go back to paying for just the very inexpensive object-based storage. The two key definitions in disaster recovery, not just disaster recovery as a service, but disaster recovery just in general, are recovery time objective and recovery point objective. The recovery time objective is the amount of time it is going to take you from the time you declare a disaster till you're back up and running. The shorter the recovery time objective, generally the more money you have to spend. The recovery point objective is how much data you're willing to put at risk. So it's basically how often am I going to replicate changes to my disaster recovery site? Am I willing to lose 15 minutes? Am I willing to lose an hour, 3 hours? This doesn't affect price very much, other than the amount of storage consumed to hold the snapshots, but that storage is pretty inexpensive to begin with. Every application or service has specific requirements. There is no one-size-fits-all for either recovery time or recovery point. And disaster recovery as a service really works well in this kind of environment. You could have some services that you say, you know what, I can only lose 10 minutes of data, and it has to be up and running in 20 minutes. And there are others that you might say, you know what, this only gets updated once a week, so I'll lose an hour's worth of data, 2 hours, whatever, and I really don't care how long it takes for you to get it back up and running. So you can customize and build a roadmap for services, which is kind of laid out on this slide. So if you were to look at like a back-end and reporting system, you really don't care how long that takes to get back up and running. You know, if it takes an hour, if it takes 8 hours, that's okay. But a customer-facing transactional app like a storefront, you want that back up and running as soon as possible, and you want to ensure that you haven't lost any customer transactions, because that would be horrible reputationally. So disaster recovery as a service really offers a superior RTO to traditional backup. When you do a traditional backup, you do your backup, and then should your service fail, you have to do a restore, and then you're back up and running. That restore, depending upon the size of the server, and you know how fast your tape technology is, could take hours, it could take days if it was big enough. For disaster recovery, or disaster recovery as a service, you would be doing your backups into the cloud. You then declare a disaster. The new images are spun up. That can be done in a matter of minutes. And then when your servers come back online, you can then do the restore and push the data back along with all the new changes that you've made over a period of time and fail back at your convenience. Then you're no longer in the time crunch because now you're basically up and running. And disaster recovery as a service really offers you kind of a great RTO without the cost trade-offs that you used to have. It used to be if you wanted to be able to recover in 15 to 30 minutes, you would have to have a hot site. And a hot site would cost you a fortune. You had to have duplicates of everything you had. You had to have another facility or pay a colo provider. And it constantly had to be up and running. You constantly had to be in sync. If you were willing to take a little bit of downtime, you could do a warm site, but still you needed to have all the duplicate hardware, and it cost a fortune. Disaster recovery as a service can offer you either warm site or cold site RTOs for the price of offsite tape backup or standard cloud-based backup. And really the key benefits for disaster recovery as a service, there's zero disruption to your operations during testing. For anybody that's worked in large organizations that do DR testing, once or twice a year, basically you have to shut down your systems for a weekend. Everybody goes to the disaster site and you bring that up. You can do non-disruptive testing with disaster recovery as a service. You can spin up an isolated virtual cloud, either in AWS or Azure, and do a full recovery, do all of your testing while you're still running an operation, and do it during normal business hours. With CCSI, you are guaranteed to speak to a qualified engineer within 30 minutes. 24/7, 365 days a year. Our NOC is staffed here in Bohemia. And we have professional engineering services here and professional systems engineers that understand that there is no cookie cutter, one size fits all solution for every company. People have customized requirements, and we'll build them to suit for each individual organization. And for those of you that have data sovereignty concerns, we can guarantee data sovereignty, meaning that your disaster recovery data won't either leave a state or leave the country or leave a particular country. For example, if you have a site in Germany and you want to do disaster recovery there, we can guarantee that the data won't leave Germany, therefore protecting you against both German privacy laws and things like GDPR. And we have optional high-touch services that can offer very short RTOs and RPOs and full-service NOC failovers. And as Joe was saying before, we've been providing services for over 40 years. We're very experienced, and we have a long line of very satisfied, very long-lived customers. And that's really all I have for disaster recovery as a service. Are there any questions?
I had one come in, Joe. It says, from a next steps perspective, how do we move forward in order for the customer to get deliverables, what the actual deliverables look like, and also associated costs? What's a typical, what's the methodology moving forward?
Well, to put a plan together, customers can reach out to a CCSI sales rep, or they can reach out to me directly. I'd be more than happy to speak to them. And the costs are generally, the ongoing monthly costs are the amount of storage consumed in the cloud and a small management fee. It's very easy for us to calculate that out. And then during a failover, you would be paying for the compute resources that were used during that failover. But in a steady state, you're just paying for the inexpensive storage, which costs about 2 cents a gigabyte per month.
Another question was, does CCSI have the ability from a managed service standpoint, not only to do their infrastructure, but also what's going into the cloud for disaster recovery?
Absolutely. Absolutely. CCSI can manage both on-premise and cloud-based infrastructure. And actually, if people have the full breadth of our services from the NOC, the Network Operations Center would realize that a server actually went down before the customer and could begin failover procedures as they're notifying the customer to cut the RTO even more.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions via chat. Did anybody else have any questions before we wrap up? Well, I just wanted to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. And also, like I said, please keep in mind we'll be sending out the next date. As Joe had mentioned earlier, this is a 3-part series. Today was the first part. And also I wanted to bring to your attention, there is a new business continuity white paper on our website, and you could find it on the resources page under white papers. Thank you again for attending, and we look forward to hearing from you and seeing you next time.